What do you think turned the tide?
Well, I think, very frankly, two things. Number one, in the first primary, we ran a very positive campaign and sort of a Marlboro type campaign on television and in the newspapers, etc. And the second time, Jackie and I just very frankly got off our tail and went out and shook hands with people, and we organized it on a block worker basis, and we got people to understand what we were talking about, the issues that we were talking about, and we got them to turn out and vote for us.
Hey, you had a bunch of people in town early this morning. You want to tell us about it?
Oh yeah, I'm a conservationist for one thing. I camp out and float rivers and do all these sort of good things. Belong to the Sierra clubs. I'm not what you'd call a bird watcher. I'm just an outdoorsman. And many of these people from all over the state who we've known over the years and floated with and camped with came in last night and camped out in Longhorn Park and got up this morning and cleaned up and came down and worked with us in a block worker program to get the vote out today. And we had over 100 people from around the state who came in here. My opponent said they were a bunch of left-wing radicals who were coming in here from outside the district. Well, they're really not. They're a bunch of lawyers and laymen and school teachers and people like that who we've floated with and camped with over the years. They came in here, camped out last night, and got up this morning and helped us work those districts and try to get the vote out.
Senator, when you go back to Austin next year, what do you think will be the greatest pressing issue at hand?
Well, there are going to be a lot of issues pressing at hand. One thing, of course, is going to be this issue of pollution. We're all very concerned about that. And I would say both air and water pollution will be one of the number one issues.
What about taxation? What do we do about it?
Well, I would say this to you, just like I said in the course of the campaign, we're probably going to have to raise more taxes. We're a growing state. We have more and more people. We're going to double in college population and the kids that are going to be in the schools, and we're going to have to raise more money. And we're going to have to raise money to treat water and air and pollution. I would suggest to you, as I have in the past, that what we ought to do at this point in Texas, because of our tax structure as it is to put the tax on luxuries, number one. And number two, I think the natural resources can stand a little bit more possibly. And I think that some of the out-of-state corporations who are beginning to move into Texas and who don't pay taxes on the same scale that they do in other major industrial states ought to be brought up to that scale. And I think we can raise the money that way without having to go to a tax on food or medicine or an income tax.
Senator Kennard, congratulations and thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's been a hard campaign, and I'm glad it's over with.
Mr. Richardson, you won by a fairly close margin. What do you contribute to your victory tonight?
Well, I think that, as I said at the end of the last primary, just a lot of good. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had a lot of real muscle and people that would get out and work and believe in what they were working for. And just one good example is my hometown of Keller. Last time they gave me 90-something votes to 50 with 3 opponents, and this time they went up to 500 and something with 37 from my opponent. So, you know, when people will turn out like that, they really care, and they really want you to win. I think my opponent ran a doggone good race for the first time out. They spent a lot of money, and I think I proved that the people can win. And I think the people did win.
It was stated that there were several issues developed in this campaign. Would you like to enumerate on some?
Well, my main issue was that a man that serves on the Commissioner's Court should be controversy means progress, and this is what we've had over the last year and a half. We've probably had more progress than the county has had in 20-something years, and I'm just glad to be just a part of that. And in the next 4 years, I hope that Tarrant County will go forward, and maybe with a little less controversy, but with a lot more progress.
Well, Mr. Richardson, thank you.
Okay. Is that all right?
And I never see white people. And my people capture the 5 missionaries and push on the ground. Because my people believe on the ground. And my people push on the ground for crucified. and my people coming and picking up all these clothes like this to the white missionaries. In few minutes, when my people pick up all these clothes, the pants, the shirt, hat, the shoes, everything, my people eat of the white missionaries. See? The problem is this because my people not believe in Jesus Christ.
Governor, will you be telling the Indianians that all is forgiven and to please come home?
Oh yes, they know that. They're here by their own volition, and I'm certain they know they're welcome back anytime. But I'm here to visit with them and visit with my relatives who live here in Texas.
There's one burning question. What does the word Hoosier mean, and where did it come from?
There are more than a dozen explanations given to this, and I think somebody wanted a name, and they decided that this was a name that would spell happiness and friendliness, and they call them Hoosiers.
How does it spell all that?
Well, Hoosiers are a pretty friendly lot, pretty happy lot, and I think you'll see the people here and hear the music, and people who enjoy a good time. I think the saying or the explanation of it is most understandable is that in the olden days when wagons went along the road and people sat on their porch or in their cabins in pioneer days, and someone wondered who it was passing, they'd say, "Who's there? Who's there?" And they say that this is how it got its name.
Mr. Marino, what was happening yesterday when all the trouble started?
Well, it's my wife and I had been to this wedding of one of our friends. We were on our way home, coming out of the premises. We noticed that there was some trouble going on the side of the building. My wife and I here, we walked over there, and a policeman approached us, and I asked him, "What's the problem?" And he looked at me and he said, "What did you say?" I said, "What's the trouble?" And at that time, he grabbed me by the tie and jerked me around and told me, he says, "Go on, get in the car." I said, "Well, what for?" And at that time, I turned around at the same moment, and they had my wife. And they put handcuffs on her and dragged her and threw her in a separate car, and they dragged me and put me in another car. And all I asked him, I said, "Well, can I at least ride with my wife?" And then he went on and told me to keep my mouth shut unless I wanted the same thing to happen to me as was happening to the rest of the people out there. They were all being head on their heads, and well, just police brutality as far as I'm concerned.
Mrs. Marino, why were you chosen? You were just standing there, and what happened to you?
Well, I was worried about what they were going to do to my husband. And I asked him, the police officer, I said, what did he do? And he said, well, take her too. And they just handcuffed me and started dragging me to the car. And they put me in the car with 5 men.
Well, I feel that the area of general practice is a specialty in itself, and the need of the people for medical care can best be given to the people by the general practitioner or family practitioner.
Doctor, the Academy has established a Board of Family Practice. What would be the function of this board?
Well, this Board of Family Practice, which was originated last year, and the first group of candidates took their examination in February and March of this year. Some 2,000 doctors across the nation in 50 states took this examination to be certified as diplomats of the American Board of Family Practice, establishing them on a par level with any other specialty.
Will this certification be permanent?
This certification will not be permanent. Each member that passes his board examination will have to be recertified every 6 years. And I might add that this is the first specialty board that has this requirement of recertification of their members.
Have you been able to analyze the runoff races that were completed yesterday? Does it appear that we're going to have a more conservative legislature this coming session?
I think the House is going to be as conservative or perhaps more conservative than it was last session. I don't think the political personality of the Texas Senate has changed a great deal. Last session, most of the people who described the Texas Senate described it as a moderate Senate. I think the 4 runoff elections yesterday provided a political personality for 1971 of the Texas Senate that can be described as a moderate Senate.
What kinds of legislation might be coming up in this kind of Senate?
I think next session that we're going to see a great deal more legislation introduced concerning the urban problems: water pollution, air pollution, mass transportation, a completely new public school program where the cities of Texas will receive their fair share of the school taxes they pay, a much more progressive education program in Texas that will help our young people be prepared for the problems of the 70s and the 80s.
The Democrats of Dallas County are concerned about the prospect of reaching over 1 million people in the county and thereby being affected by the Harris Amendment, which will limit the amount of filing fees they can charge and cut down on the party money to run elections. What do you propose to help them out?
I think we're going to have to give serious consideration in the future to state financial participation in both party primaries. The filing fees for a lot of the county offices are reaching such high dollar and cents figure that it's, I think, prohibitive for people running their office. I think the filing fee should be high enough to keep people from just running for public office to get their names in the newspapers and on the television and radio stations. But I think the cost of campaigns in general, and particularly filing fees, are something that the Texas legislature and the United States Congress are going to have to give a great deal of attention to in the near future.
I understand that we have been accused of police brutality at the National Hall. This is not true. There has not ever been any police brutality at the National Hall. I feel that we have a right to defend ourselves. We have never taken up a club or anything in this manner and started beating people with it. We don't do that. We're not that kind of people out here. And if these people want to investigate me or my officers, their background, they're welcome to do so. I invite them to do it. At any time they want to come to my office and talk with me, I'll be happy to talk with them.
Court hearing examiner Robert Lloyd says he's going to ask for a conference of all the governments involved to discuss the legalities of this question. The conference will likely be in a month here in this general area. Here in Garland, this is Teal Salon reporting for Channel 8 News on the Move. Dallas City Water Director Henry Grazier is asking that the North Central Texas Council of Governments be given the authority to control the development of sewage and septic tanks around Lake Ray Hubbard. His request was the purpose of a hearing here this morning in the Garland City Council chambers by the Texas Water Quality Control Board. After the hearing, Grazier told me why he feels the development of Lake Ray Hubbard is so unusual.
Well, I think that our youth is naturally the future of the whole wide world. And when youth is interested in doing something, earning something, contributing something to society by working and knowing what the value of a dollar is and how to spend it, I think that's the most exciting approach that youth can have to life. And boy, more power to it. I think it's fabulous.
You haven't given up on the youth of our country, then?
No, I sure haven't. I get to travel around the country a great deal, and I speak for the Cancer Society to young people about not smoking, and I also am involved with mental health with young people. And I think they're great. They're a swinging, groovy mass of kids. They're far more educated than we think they are. And when you see kids like this that are eager to take what they've got up here and put it into something so that it'll earn and it'll contribute to America, wow, I think that's just great.
Mr. Bush has commented that along the line of campaigning, you've said the things that you're for and you've never said the things that you're against. I mean, rather, that you've said the things that you're against and not say anything about the things that you're for. Just what are you for?
Well, that's Mr. Bush's version of it. I've been campaigning on issues throughout this campaign, stating the things I agreed with and what I stood for and things I disagreed with. I've been an issue-oriented candidate. I think, for example, on this question of 2 Republican senators, we have a good quote from 1966 when the Honorable John Towers said that we need a voice in both party councils in the United States Senate. Now, if that was true in 1966, I'm sure it must be just as true in 1970.
Michael Joseph Papsquar went on trial for his life today in Fort Worth for the slayings of Daniel Ramirez Sr. Ramirez was killed along with his 4-year-old son, Daniel Jr., and Sammy Ramirez Jr. Other members of the slain Ramirez family were in court today as Papsquar was seated with his attorney. 2 brothers, Harold Frederick Anderson and Donald Lord Anderson, along with Papsquar's wife, Bunny, are charged with the murders of the Ramirez trio. The slaying allegedly occurred after Daniel Ramirez Sr. had sold the defendant, Michael Papsquar, some impure heroin. Jury selection is expected to take several days. Cochise Cash, Channel 8 News, from Fort Worth.
Then what do you think the major issues will be in November between you and Benson?
I think the issue is going to be who can be the most effective United States Senator for Texas, given the philosophical beliefs that I have, which I think are compatible with a broad number of Texans, the most vast majority of Texans. All right, how do you get something done for these views? Do you get it done by perpetuating the status quo in the Democratic Party, or do you try some new ideas and some new answers? Now, that's part of it, and then getting something done for Texas, being effective. That's far more important than party label, and that's what I think the issue is going to be. They recommended a tariff which was designed to break the price of domestic crude. In my view, that would have resulted in a higher, oddly enough, price of gasoline, but it would also result in tremendous weakening of our national security and a tremendous weakening of the Texas economy. We had it estimated 460,000 people would have been thrown out of work if this was put into effect. So a lot of what I talked about was the need to beat down that proposal. It has been defeated so far. It hasn't been put into effect. But I'm now considering legislation in the Ways and Means Committee that will see that no tariff is ever imposed on oil if that tariff is solely designed to bust the price of domestic oil, domestic crude. It would be bad for Texas, it would be bad for jobs in Texas, but worse, it would be bad for the security of the United States.
Well, heretofore, we've been guided in the use of firearms by the state statutes. We have had nothing in writing that's a policy in this regard. This will prepare for the officers in the field some guidelines for the use of firearms. This goes into the purpose of the directive when firearms are permitted under state statute. It goes into departmental policy statements, which restricts the use of firearms in some cases, and then the intent of this directive, which is what we're trying to get across to the officers, as well as some new investigative procedure techniques that we'll be following in the future. As I've stated before publicly, we will, in the future, take all cases involving shootings to the grand jury, whether death results or not. What we're trying to do with this order is simply to cut down on any unnecessary shootings. Now, the officers are permitted by state statute to use firearms under certain conditions, and this we expect. But where there may be some doubt, we're trying to eliminate that doubt on the part of the officers now so that there will not be any unnecessary shooting on the part of any of our officers.
We have not compiled or formalized our findings at this point. We hope to do so in the near future. I wish I could tell you a little more closely than that, but this is an area that obviously can't be handled in a matter of minutes or hours or days.
How is this committee made up? Of whom is its membership composed?
It's composed of a number of groups in the city who are interested in services to children, and a number of individuals, simply as interested citizens, as I am. I, as an individual, am in the group.
Thus far, have you found indications that Dallas County indeed is not receiving adequate child welfare or general welfare services?
We're not prepared at this point to give any such statement at all, Mr. Ayers. Perhaps later on we'll be able to make some statement on that score.
We've finished our planning phase. On last Friday, we had a formal board meeting at which time the basic business plan was approved by the board of directors. And we're, in the next weeks and months, we'll be actively pursuing universities as well as their faculty for interaction with Alpha. And we would, if our projections hold true, Alpha system should be become profitable sometime in late 72 or early 73.
One juror was seated this afternoon as jury selection began in the 4th District Criminal Court in Fort Worth. Michael Joseph Papiskar, one of 5 persons charged in connection with the fatal shooting of 3 members of the Ramirez family, will be tried first. The state is seeking the death penalty against the 29-year-old motorcycle shop owner. Papiskar is charged with the slayings of Daniel Ramirez Sr., his 4-year-old son, Daniel Jr., and Sammy Ramirez Jr. 2 brothers, the 2 Anderson brothers, Harold Anderson and Danny Anderson, along with Papiskar's wife, Bunny, are also charged with the murders. The slayings allegedly took place after Daniel Ramirez Sr. sold Michael Papiskar some impure heroin. The jury selection is expected to take at least 2 more days. Cochise Cash, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.